Main Street Media, Utah. This is Talk with John. Look forward to being with you for basically the next 2 hours. I will be introducing my first guest here shortly. Then Joel Skausen will be joining us at about 5 p.m. Looking forward to being with you for the next 2 hours. Thank you so much for joining me today. Looking forward to having a great conversation. One, Utah focused. And then the second hour, we will be more national and world events focused. Looking forward to being with you today. But before we get going, so real quickly, you can go to mainstreetmediautah.org, or you can go to our channels on Rumble, X, or YouTube to be able to view the show. So look forward to being with you. Let me get the show off to a proper start, as it were. The first thing I want to do is, guess what? Someone changed my information, and it's got the gout crowd. Not exactly sure why that is there. So let's see. Let me see if I can. You know what? I'm not sure I know how to fix that. Well, I'm not the grout. It's not the gout crowd. It is Talk with John, and that's a production thing that I can't exactly take care of. We'll have to let. Eventually, I'm going to be having a producer that can take care of that for me. Let's see. Let me look at one other spot. Yes, there we go. We're just going to change that now, folks, and that's the awesome thing that you get to have with the show host being the producer. You get to see behind the scenes, so you gotta love it. All right, let's get this show off to a proper start. I hope my show is a gift back to. I want to do my show first, my show prayer, and then the show mantra. Now, the show prayer is just the prayer of my heart. So the show prayer is, I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra, where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. All right, folks. Let's get to my guest. And thank you. I want to introduce my guest right now, but my computer does not want to. What's the proper term? Doesn't want to exactly work with me right at the moment. So I want to introduce my guest, Austen Hepworth. And as you can see, his name appears right there on the screen. Fantastic. Austen Hepworth is an attorney. For those of you that don't know, let me do a quick bio for him. Austen Hepworth is an attorney licensed in Utah and California. Austen has worked in many areas of law, including constitutional, business, tax, estate planning, and civil litigation, and has a deep appreciation for America and the truths that have made it the country it is today. Austen has authored legal briefs at every level of the federal courts and Utah courts, and has drafted and helped pass a variety of laws in Utah. Austen graduated summa cum laude and first in his law school and undergraduate class, and he graduated as valedictorian of his high school. Austen was, and let's say, Cypress Pirates, go Pirates. Austen was homeschooled from grades 3 through 9 and served a mission in Taiwan for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where he learned Mandarin Chinese. Austen currently runs his own law firm and works to help others believe in and work to keep the good that makes America a land of liberty. So if you're a believer in those things, he happens to have a group or an organization that it's called Believe. It has a lot of different, what would be the proper term? a lot of different segments or a lot of different sub organizations underneath the Believe brand. But Austen, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you being here.
No problem. It's good to be here, John. It's always fun to
Also, he
be with
ran
you.
for Attorney General for the state of Utah. I know a number of people, including myself, that voted for him. Boy, I wish I was saying Attorney General Austen Hepworth, but you don't get to have what you want all the time.
Yeah, not all the time, but sometimes.
Sometimes, once in a while, especially along those lines. So, Austin, it's I think we last had you on in November. We were talking about your run at that time. It might have been October. Can't remember. November, October. We had you run when you were running for Attorney General for the state of Utah. And now we're bringing you on because one thing that you do on a yearly basis when the when the state legislature is going to meet, you have come on historically with me to talk about some of the bills that are out. And there's been even legislative sessions where I've had you on a few times, and we'll see if schedules coordinate for you to do that. I am throwing that at you without having talked to you beforehand. But like I said, if they coordinate. So, maybe they won't. But nonetheless, I want to bring you on, and there's a number of things that are happening in the legislature, a number of maturations, and here are some of the subjects that I thought I wanted to cover with you. Um, the state legislature is possibly considering legislation to take down signatures in order to be on the primary ballots, in order to get to get your name on a primary ballot, whether it be Republican, Democrat, or something along those lines. Take signatures from 28,000 for the state down to 1,000. Also, want to talk about corporations not being able to buy single family residences. The state school board can remove members, or at least they're trying to get a bill to get that done. Wonder why that might be coming out. How about this? Can John Twitchell remove them? Because I'd choose some to remove. And then the state legislature is thinking about including polling questions on the ballot, if I understand correctly. Also, another bill, take fluoride out of our drinking water. I don't remember that one coming up. Now, Austen seems to think that's come up before. And then free market versus the rule of law, kind of just over general. I thought education funding is always a big part of the state legislative session, and then we want to also hit the Supreme Court rejecting to hear the federal land case for Utah and the ownership of Utah and Utah lands. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 some odd percent of the state's lands are owned by the federal government. Now, Austen and I had a brief conversation before the program today, and I said I think that's unconstitutional. And so there might be a little bit of a disagreement with us on that one between Austen and I. So I'm looking forward to learning. So, Austen, which one of those subject matters do you think you want to start with?
Well, I think perhaps one of the more pressing ones for people to understand with this session is there will be, I think, a lot of proposed changes to the election system. Definitely the Phil Lyman campaign, even going back to RFK running, he sued the state over some of their election laws, and he won. So Utah's election laws haven't, been fully above board, you could say, with constitutional muster and things, but they will be cleaning up a number of these things, or addressing them, or changing them, or making them more favorable to themselves. There's a whole host of different things that will be going on. We don't have all the bills released yet.
What do you mean by making the bills more better for themselves? What do you mean by that?
And just whenever you go to someone in charge and they need to change the system that puts them in charge, it's natural that they will put things in that make it better for themselves, meaning more incumbent protection or easier path to, candidacy or whatever it is that is better for them. So you'll see that a little bit on things like the statewide referenda and ballot initiative type things. There's one proposal. And this one, I'm actually not opposed to this one. I kind of like it. But some people could be. But it's a proposal to say that if the law in question is instituting a new tax or creating a tax increase, that requires a vote of 60% of Utahns, not just 50% to win. And I think that's could be a good thing to help protect against some of the, just people voting yes because they heard a cool advertisement once or something. To say that if this is going to have a fiscal impact on the state and raise taxes, you need at least 60% of people to vote for that. Now, I wouldn't mind the same check and balance in the legislature. If you're going to spend more of our money, have it be more than 50% as well.
Yeah.
But our legislature they'd probably still pass it at 60%. So I don't know if it'd be much of a check and balance. But we'll see things like that. But this one is fairly concerning to me. It is HB 193 for the 2025 session. And what it is proposing is, so with the Phil Lyman issues, Governor Cox got 28,000 signatures supposedly. At least that's what he got on the primary ballot with. Later, they did some audits and things, and there's plenty of questions and stuff surrounding that. I think we'll still get more legislation on verification and different things. But the bill that came out, I think my bet is it's in response to people upset that the rich or those with lots of money can do the 28,000 signatures, whereas it's a too high of a hurdle for people that don't have a ton of funds. And so what the proposal is in HB 193, and this is from Representative Raymond Ward, he's proposing to lower that to make it the same essentially as what it takes for an independent to get on the ballot. So as an independent candidate, when I ran for Attorney General, my only option to get on the ballot was to get 1,000 signatures for a statewide race. And he's lowering essentially all signatures, saying, hey, if you get 1,000 signatures for governor, senator, Attorney General, you can get on the primary ballot for a political party that has a convention system. And the concern to me with that is that essentially will completely kill the convention and caucus system. There won't be any reason for it at that point, because getting 1,000 signatures for a statewide office is not super difficult. For a state house district race, you'd have to get 100 signatures.
Oh, wow.
For the, state Senate district race, 200 signatures. State auditor, state treasurer, 200 signatures. U.S. House of Representatives, 500 signatures. And it allows for the party just to essentially become meaningless, because everyone would just run under the Republican label. You wouldn't even need to be slightly vetted by people in the party or who represent the party. You're just purely getting 1,000 signatures or 200 signatures and appearing on the ballot for that party.
Okay,
That
so
to me is
Austen,
a concern.
I've got I've got someone that'd be like, well, Austen, you ran as an independent, and you only had to get 1,000. What's the problem with someone wanting to do that under the Republican, being a Republican? Wouldn't have that been better for you? And what's the problem with someone only having to get 1,000 signatures versus 28,000?
Yeah, so as an independent, if you're getting on the ballot, you don't have the weight of the party behind you. You don't have its reputation. You're not taking on its name. I was very honest that I was running independent outside the parties. I believed that the AG should be outside the parties, and so I ran on that. But if every person can just get 1,000 signatures and appear on the Republican Party's primary ballot Democrats can appear on it super easily. They don't. Again, a Democrat now can do it with 28,000 signatures, but it costs a lot of money to get that far, and it reduces the number of people that do that. 1,000 signatures is a number that even one individual can get on their own. It takes a while, but you can get that as one individual. But it doesn't take a lot of money to get 1,000 signatures. And it essentially just renders the party and what it stands for meaningless, because the party then has no check and balance on who can be part of the party and who can't. It's got no vetting system, and it completely just guts the whole party processes, procedures, any of those things, and makes the parties virtually meaningless. And I don't think that's proper under the Constitution. I believe we do have private rights of association, and the party has worked for a long time, Democrat and Republican. And I don't think it's right just to say, oh, because you've got name recognition in the state, we're just going to let anyone be part of you. It'd be like saying, oh, anyone can become a jazz member and play on the Jazz just with 1,000 signatures. It just destroys the meaning of the team at that point, and we'd be gutting the whole meaning of the parties, which again is that's happening to an extent with the signature gathering process. This would just drive the nail in the coffin and totally kill those in the state and the meaning. There'd be no meaning behind them anymore.
So big concern of mine is, and so why is the caucus? Okay, so you have a concern that it would overcome the caucus system. Why do you think the caucus system is valuable?
To me, the caucus system is valuable because what it produces, or what it can produce if people choose to participate, is it creates a system where there's some level of checks and balances on who gets to represent people and ideals. Now, again, people can run independent and voters can vote for that. But what our system created for many years was a system where the Democrats would produce candidates with certain values, the Republican Party would produce candidates with certain values, and people in large part begin to rely on that. Now, obviously, we as people should do our own homework and research, but with the system as it is, the value the parties brought is you at least had an idea of where the candidates generally stood on issues. If we collapse the caucus system and there's no check and balance, again, you could just have, we kind of saw it on the presidential ballot. You saw Lucifer, Every Love, Just in Case or something running. Like, it was just kind of bizarre and almost making a mock of the system. And you have people that can start to do things like that. It gets easier and easier and easier. The more ballot access there is, the easier it is to get there. And get that Republican R by your name, then the more things start to go wild in politics, where there's no vetting, there's no holding them to certain standards. Because with a party and governance and people, there's some level of accountability to the party. There's some level of check and balance if you're not towing a certain line, and that would just completely be gone. You wouldn't be beholden to the party at all at this point, which in some ways could be a good thing if you don't like the parties. But whether you like the parties or not, I don't believe it's proper for the government to come in and completely gut years of private association and take away those rights from people. And I do believe that, for example, right now in the Republican Party, anyone can run. You can run if you register as a Republican, but you have to go through the vetting process and the system and eventually get selected to represent them. And I don't think there's any constitutional basis. There shouldn't be. Again, courts have disagreed with me on this, but I don't believe that the law should just be able to say, we're just going to take your name because it's got a lot of goodwill associated with it and you've got a good name recognition. So we'll just let anyone have that because you wouldn't let them in. So we'll tell you have to let them in. That's an issue to me. Again, the courts have disagreed, but I don't think we should be continuing that.
So I'm going to give kind of a critique of the caucus system that I've heard, and I guess critique is the bad word, but one of the reasons why people like it, and that is because you get to have an individual that gets to really get they go to these meet and greets of the candidates. Sometimes they have open houses depending on the office they're running for. But there's also meet the candidates night where delegates can go to, and the candidates have to stand there and just answer questions that are thrown at them from the delegates. And there could be several delegates from every area, and probably I think uh, my caucus area is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3,000 homes or something along those lines, that we got delegates from. And we got I want to say for the state it was like we got 4 delegates. For the county we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 7. So people got to really go and vet and ask questions, and ask specific questions that matter to their neighbors. And then a lot of them would report back to their neighbors and say, this is what I found. But that is something that was done at the founding of America. Is from the founding was they would caucus, they would get together, form those groups and caucus. So I really think I, that's one of the reasons why people like it. The other thing, the counter to that is, well, shouldn't I just be able to vote for whoever I want to? And I'm going to say the counter to that is, you may not be able to vote for whoever you want to. You drop that threshold down to 1,000 people. It's whoever the money wants to get behind is gonna come out of convention.
Yeah, and to me, the counter to, well, shouldn't I be able to vote for whoever I want to, is to say, well, sure, have them run independent. You can have 100,000 independents on the ballot, and they can, but I don't have any right as a person or a candidate to insist that I have a certain label attached to my name. And right now, the law lets people on the ballot. You just have to choose to go the harder route, and people don't want to do that. They want to ride on the coattails of the Republican Party here in the state and just slap that label on. And every time we slap it on, this is one of the reasons why the Phil Lyman campaign produced so much heat, because people view Spencer Cox as a rhino, or others as a rhino. They call them Republican in name only. And whether or not you agree with that, it's that there is a group looking to protect the meaning of what it means to be Republican. That there's certain things you stand for, there's certain things you do. And again, that's something that if you formed a group, let's say that you started Zion's Bank and it meant something to belong to Zion's Bank, and then the law comes in and just says, oh, well, anyone can have a Zion's Bank account. They can take on that name. They can use your name in business. So if I just all started going out and saying, yeah, I'm a Zion's banker, I'm a Zion's banker, I'm a Zion's banker, we know readily in business that's absolutely not fair. You just stole their name from them. You can't do that. And that's exactly what the law is doing right here with the parties. And this goes both ways with Republican and Democrat. It's hurting both, because there are some districts where only Democrats win, and those could also be taken over the other way. But it's just letting everyone use their name and goodwill and all that we have traditionally protected for a very long time here in America.
Any other thoughts on that?
No, just to say that's, again, to me, so far of the bills I've seen, probably one of the most concerning. There's obviously other concerns, and there'll be other bills with concerns as well. But
what about corporations not being able to buy single family residences? There are pro and cons. There's a lot of conservatives who are for this. And I can see why some people have concerns. Your thoughts on this bill?
Yeah, so you're talking about HB 149, if you want to check it out. There's also HB 151, I think, or one right around it. And there's a couple bills dealing with what to do about institutional investors owning a lot of single family homes. And HB 149 basically says that entities, unless they meet certain family structures, so for example, you could put your house into a family-owned LLC still with this bill, but it's still pretty restrictive. But for the most part, an entity can't buy a single-family home. So this would mean that for all the renters, there's a ton of small mom and pop businesses that buy 5 or 10 homes, rent them out, have a portfolio, get income off of it, and they put them in LLCs. They wouldn't be able to do that. And so their option would be to buy it all in their own individual name and be subject to liability exposure if something burned down, or not have these anymore. And I understand the concern with very large groups that are buying significant amounts of homes. But to me, instead of saying that we should prohibit investors, entities from buying properties, to me, the better route is to look at monopoly laws, antitrust laws, and say, do we put thresholds in to say, at some point you can only own a certain percent of the market, no more, whatever, because we do that with quite a few things here in America, where we say, for example, the government just said, no, Spirit Airlines, I think, and another airlines can't merge because it creates too big entity and reduces competition and all that. And so we have a number of laws there, and I think that it's proper for the law to explore proper anti-monopoly type protections. But I do really struggle with the concept of saying we're going to restrict people from using an entity to buy a home. It's one of the basic things. And honestly, there may be some constitutional challenges to something like that because entities are considered to have constitutional personhood under the Constitution and things. And so saying you can't own no
I'm not a big
property.
fan of that, but yes, that is true.
Yep.
Okay, so
yeah, there's some issues with it, but it's there as a proposal.
one of the I've heard from a number of people on the conservative side. They're worried about businesses like BlackRock coming in and buying up a bunch of single family residents, and then what that happens is they can start raising the prices for rent. It makes property more difficult to get a hold of. You get BlackRock come in and start selling homes and buying homes for 30% over the market price or 40% over the market price. It makes homes more expensive, and then they can restrict what you can do on that. Another thing they try to do is restrict what you're able to have on that property, for instance, firearms and so forth. So, and let alone the ability that they can have to start price controlling on rent. Your thoughts to those people that have those concerns?
Yeah, and again, those are, I think, real concerns. And to me, it goes back to the monopoly side of things, where we just start to look at it from a perspective of saying, yeah, there's a point at which it becomes too big, and we need to put some things in place, and maybe even have some protections. There's another bill, it's not exactly on this, but similar mindset to say they put restrictions on what landlords can and can't tell you. They put restrictions on what they can do. And so, for example, one of the proposals this year is to require landlords to give you 60 days notice of a rent increase. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a good thing or bad thing, just saying that our laws regulate what landlords can and can't do. And if a law was to say, hey, landlords, you can't restrict Second Amendment rights on your property, there's certainly ways to start addressing these. We do it through HOAs. We tell HOAs what they can or can't regulate by law. There's another proposal this time dealing with whether HOAs can regulate solar panels. This has given them a little bit more freedom than the law had previously to let them regulate solar panels. And we go back and forth on these things. They'll pass laws to say, for example, that an HOA can't ban the display of the flag on the HOA. And so that right exists because of a statute. Unfortunately, it's one of the, again, wild things to think about where we're at. But when I look at these laws and some of the concerns, I say, yeah, things like restricting rights, certain fundamental rights, Some of those may need to be protected. Some of those may need to extend down to certain extents. We've done that even with LGBTQ movement. We said you can't discriminate against gays or lesbians and renting your place, that type of thing. And that's something the law has dealt with for quite a while. And when I look at it again and say, well, we're just going to ban the BlackRocks of the world from owning something by stating that no entity can own things, we're hurting a significant number of the middle class as well, in that we're exposing them to liability that they wouldn't have to take on otherwise. And I don't believe that it's going to end super well with that type of, I call it kind of like a shotgun approach or a sledgehammer approach, where we have a problem and we're just going to address it through kind of the most drastic means. The way to solve needs to be a little bit more tailored to the issue at hand. The issue is these super large investors that are buying things, and it's not the mom and pops that own 5 or 10 properties to rent. And when we come down with heavy sledgehammers to regulate an issue that, again, admittedly is an issue, it creates issues. And I think we need to be more wise about how we deal with things with the law, instead of just jumping and saying, oh, no more entities, we're sick of those. Because I just don't think that takes into account the sheer logistics of how most people invest or do business here.
Let's also talk about the state school board. They want to, there's a petition in there to be able to remove members of the state school board. Who would be able to do that? Who can initiate it? And should that law be passed, how would they be removed? And I think there's a certain person that they are having in mind that they want to get rid of.
Yeah, well, she's technically gone now because she didn't get through the primary last year. But yes, this is one of the funny things to me about government is they had concerns. I'm talking about the government had concerns with the way the optics looked with the school board. And so this law is specific to school board, and it's saying, hey, we can create a code of conduct for ourselves and we can now enforce it. And it's the school board that can choose to kick you off the school board if you violate it. Or to an extent, there's an independent group that can look at things and also make some decisions with this proposal. But to me, from a principal perspective, I believe strongly that government officials should be held accountable to certain standards. We shouldn't be bribing. We shouldn't be. I don't think we should have a lot of the conflicts of interest we have, where we pad our pocketbooks through laws and development deals and whatever else that we pass and facilitate.
Interesting how there's a lot of attorneys that make a lot of laws in the state legislature. We have a lot of state employees in the state legislature, and we have a lot of developers in the state legislature.
Yeah, and to me, I'm a big fan of saying we should have some more freedom from conflicts on these things. But again, to say government officials should have a standard, to an extent, I believe that standards should strongly respect freedom of speech, the intense, robust political process, freedom of religion, things across the board. And speech on a political issue, even if you really don't like it, I don't believe for a second you should be able to kick someone out based on speech on a political issue. So again, there's kind of a can of worms with this, where it's they're saying, oh, we can pass some rules and regulations about proper conduct. And I go, well, that's a little too loosey-goosey for me. We need to have some very clear issues. And I don't believe they should just apply to the school board. I don't see why we target the school board for this, because this should be all government, to say there's a process. If there's a government official that violates the clear ethics of office, because there are some ethics of office that just apply to the office. Again, don't take a bribe. That's one. And that should apply. And there should be a way for that to be investigated and enforced. Currently, our AG's office says it has conflicts. It won't enforce those laws against Utah politicians for the most part. And so there is this necessity to fix some things in the system to have a little more checks and balance. But this, to me, is in response to a specific political incident. And I believe it's far more involved with political type targeting.
What and
And
let's just mention what that political situation was.
yeah, so it was with Natalie Klein, the one that at least we're guessing it came from, talking about transgender, so boys playing girl sports. And there were certainly some issues. I'm not saying that everything she did was, super great. But again, as an elected official, saying that, to now say, oh, well, we can kick people off now, that type of thing. I think that there's concerns because the transgender side of things needs serious discussion still. We're nowhere near being at a settled point politically on it. And we need to have robust and open conversation on it, even if there's some feelings that get hurt along the way. And that goes both ways. I'm not saying that either side should have more freedom than the other with that. We need very open discussion on these topics. And so to introduce things like this, to me, following in the wake of it, makes it so that there's it kind of shuts down speech to an extent. It makes people less willing to talk on certain issues. And so I don't like kind of the atmosphere or the surroundings this bill's coming packaged in. I don't like some of what it suggests. Again, it's not fully there. It doesn't give all the details of what they will or won't regulate. It's just giving them power to do certain things. But to me, without proper checks and balances and whatnot, I say no. And I just say it should apply to all government. Let's pass a Government Ethics Act.
How does someone get on the state school board?
They have to be voted in. It's a voted position, elected
So,
position.
if the state school board was to remove another state member, what happens to the voice of the people that voted him in?
Then it would be, well, again, it'd be overridden for that moment. And people can be removed from office. Judges will get removed. Presidents can be impeached and removed from office, that type of thing.
But judges are, in order for that to happen, the judges have to be impeached by the same people that put them there.
Correct. At the federal level, yeah. And so there is certainly a process of where officials can be removed for misconduct, and I think that is a proper check and balance. Where it's true misconduct related to the office, I stole $1 million from the county. Sure, take him out. We don't want him there anymore, type thing. But it goes back, and this is one of the interesting things to your point about the will of the people. The founders, and this is something America got a lot of criticism for. I was in Italy last year while Trump's running for office, and he's getting prosecuted and things, and people would go, Austen, that a felon can run for office in America. That was a huge oversight on the part of the founders. And I said, I don't think it was an oversight. I think it was one of the checks and balances the founders had, that they were fighting against what they felt were laws that were unjust. These laws made them criminals. They were all criminals in a sense. If they said no criminals can run for office, they could have kept all themselves out, type thing.
I have a T-shirt that says, "It's only treason if you lose."
Yes, that was probably their motto, and so, but part of it is it's the same principle as jury nullification. The jury has the power what they feel is an unjust law, and if the people see that someone was prosecuted and convicted and they felt it was unjust, they still have the ability to choose to put that person in office to represent them. And so there is this, I believe, a very strong balance that should exist of not overriding the will of the people and just removing someone because we don't like them. There has to be, I think, clear ethics that everyone agrees, or virtually everyone agrees. Yeah, you don't steal from office, you don't take bribes, some of these basic things. But again, on a political issue, I don't believe there should be. We need to have super robust discussion on those. So,
for me, why that bill's important is the principle. So if it starts with the state school board, where does it end?
well, eh, I don't. When you say where does it end? Again, I would love for there to be a proper check and balance on enforcing the laws against government officials. And so this is starting to create a mechanism to enforce the laws against government officials. But but to where it ends, is the legislature going to impose it on themselves? Probably not. Um, and that's where it gets to be the most important. And so we need. So this is one that I don't see. I see it affecting local type politics or education type things. But again, I would say we shouldn't vote for something like this until it's put in the proper light, proper checks and balances, proper applicability to general government type thing. Call it the Government Accountability Act or something, where there is a mechanism to enforce the laws against government officials that Utah has lacked pretty significantly. And again, to say, I'm far more concerned with government officials that refuse to release documents to us, even though the law says they have to, or government officials that close public meetings simply because they don't want to deal with the public, and they make votes without public input, even though that's a felony under the law. Those are the types of things I believe we should be enforcing, not robust political discussion on charged topics.
There's another bill. So we've got about 15 minutes until right around 15 minutes until the end of this segment. So we've got a few more matters to cover. There's a bill to take fluoride out of the water in the state of Utah. What are your thoughts there?
I am a huge fan of forcibly on any type of health procedure. I'm a big fan of saying the government can't force people to do it. If you want to add fluoride to your own water, go ahead, I say. But I don't think the government should universally do it for people. And I think a big part of freedom is giving us each the ability to decide on health to a large extent. And so I'm a very large fan of removing fluoride from the water and letting people choose what they feel is healthy for them or not.
Is this being done anywhere else in the country?
Fluoride's been a debate on and off. There's some cities that ban adding it. There's some cities that require adding it. It's sometimes jurisdiction by jurisdiction. RFK is pretty opposed to it. He wants to pass a federal something against putting fluoride in water. So it's certainly a topic of conversation right now that's come up more with RFK's prominence, I think, rising a little bit. But it has been a debate and topic for quite some time. So
the other thing is I don't know that the government is fully transparent on what type of fluoride it is. How they go about gathering that fluoride. I don't think there's ever been any really mention of what type of fluoride it is. It's not when people say it's fluoride. There's a little bit more to that, especially the story on how fluoride getting in water came to be about and where it comes from. That information has not been made public wide.
Yeah, there's a lot of, for anyone that loves a good conspiracy rabbit hole, you can follow the fluoride ones. And there's all kinds of claims and conjectures and propositions and things that people believe or whatnot about how it came to be, where it came from, and whatnot. I'm not saying they aren't true, just that, to your point, I don't believe we have great, solid information because there are so many competing storylines out there to follow. But again, overall, fluoride isn't great for everyone. And maybe it helps with teeth, maybe it doesn't. There's debates about that, whether drinking it does anything or not. People debate about whether it messes with mental health and anxiety and different things, whether it interacts with other pollutants. And, there's a whole host of things. And I just say, look, we can have our water, and if people feel they need fluoride, let them go get fluoride.
So so there's a part of me that goes, if putting things in our water is so important, why don't we put in like vitamin C and vitamin D? We need that a lot more.
Yep.
We need that a lot more
Yeah.
than
Some of
we
those,
need fluoride.
some of it they'd say, well, we can't deliver all of it. Some of it tastes bad. Some of it, yada, yada, yada. But yes, to your point. But again, if you go back just to the point of checks and balances and the power that exists, do I want the government to have the power just to be adding things to my water that it thinks I need? What if they have something that soothes my mind and calms me down? And they're like, look, we have less violence when people drink this water.
If we
Um,
put Prozac in, or
yeah. And I just go, no, I don't. I'm not a fan of this. I believe we should strongly protect our water and food sources and say, no, the government can't just throw in whatever. We should be keeping these as pure as possible and then let people decide what they do with them. That's my premise.
so tell us a little bit about Believe, what you guys try to accomplish. I want to make sure we covered that before we come to the end. And there's still three other topics: the free market versus rule of law, education, funding, and reject federal. Um, the Supreme Court rejecting Utah's lawsuit that was joined by 12 other states to get the federal land. So let's talk about Believe, and then let's get to the federal land situation, because you and I might be on opposite sides of this. That would be interesting.
Yeah,
I
we
think
should
that
talk
might
about
be the
that.
first time we'd be on opposite sides of an issue.
Yeah. So Believe, just answer that question, is um, the thing I feel really turns. We're here talking about laws and we talk about elections, we talk about politics, but I believe more and more as I move on through life that it's the daily small things we do that really determine the outcome of some of these things. The things we talk about, the things we put effort into, the things we put time into, it all builds and creates something. And to me, Believe is about trying to help people believe or have faith in the fact that their individual efforts matter, that the things they say and do shape our country and our state. And we're far more powerful than we think, even if we don't get the result we want or hope for that second. These things work out. So we focus on a lot of different things, but our main purpose is to try and get people to exercise their potential and really start to be an influence for good. Let's make a change. Let's do things. Let's not just sit around and wait for the world to hand us whatever it wants to hand us. We can be proactive. We can address things, solve problems, that type of thing.
And I've attended a number of Believe meetings that you've had, and initiatives that you've done, and bottom line, I completely want to mention to the audience, really look at Believe. It's worth being a part of. There are a lot of different people there with different mindsets. Um, I mean, across the spectrum. It's not people that I would all of them are not necessarily people that I would consider the typical conservative mindset, but just people wanting to do good.
Yeah, no, thanks. But to get to your point about, so Supreme Court yesterday rejected Utah's federal lands lawsuit where they were trying to get control of about half the lands, I think, here in the state. Utah's position was the federal government's not doing anything with these, and it's not supposed to just hold land that it doesn't do anything with. And they said their position essentially was the Constitution doesn't expressly say the federal government can do this, meaning just hold land indefinitely. So therefore, it must be unconstitutional because the federal government only has the powers given to it in the Constitution. There is this whole other side to the Constitution, though, that says that the federal government has the power to do whatever is necessary and proper to accomplish the stated things there. And there are things like, navies, armies. We talk the government having military bases. We talk the federal government owning
Postal
land,
roads.
postal roads, even strategically. Like, to me, it was pretty clear the Constitution envisioned owning land and holding it. Now, the question whether they had to do something with it or not, is a separate question. But if you go into the history of the country, Utah became a state. Well, when Utah was here, so the federal government acquired the land from Mexico. Utah used to be a part of Mexico. When the saints that came to Utah, when they left Missouri and started on their trek here, they were actually leaving the United States. They were coming to Mexico. And then
Right.
there's the Mexican-American War. America actually then gets the land from Mexico, and suddenly they're back in the United States. But that was just land acquired by the federal government. We had the Louisiana Purchase acquired that way. We had Alaska acquired that way. We have things like Puerto Rico that are territories of the U.S. government, and they're not states. They're just held by the U.S. government. And we have Guam. We have these other ones that are military strategic places. We've got bases around the world type thing. And so Utah comes in and says, hey, yeah, we have some things where when we became a state, we signed a contract with the federal government. And our contract said, we will use the lands that we're currently using, and we can have that for our state. But the other lands, the other 70% of the lands we're not using, we agreed to give to you forever. And they said the term forever. They said, these are yours forever. We agree that we want to become a state enough that we'll just give you the 70% of the lands forever. And so in this lawsuit that Utah filed last year, when I talked to people about it, I said, oh, it's a political stunt. It's not going to go anywhere, because
Why do you say that?
if you go back in it, if the Supreme Court agreed with Utah that the federal government couldn't just hold land forever, it would undo crazy amounts of things currently in existence. It would have huge repercussions across existing frameworks. Again, just going to land that the government holds as a territory. We have still a fair amount of that around the world. But in addition, Utah signed a contract to become a state. It made an agreement with the federal government and said, condition of our statehood is we'll give you control of these lands. If Utah takes control of those lands back and says, oh, you actually don't have the power to do this, so we get them back, it then raises the question, natural legal question of, oh, so did you just renege on your contract? And is that going to jeopardize your statehood? Because if you want your lands back, it'd be kind of like saying, oh, okay, I'll pay you $50,000 for that car. You give me the car, and I'm holding the car, and then I say to the courts, I want my $50,000 back, and I want the car too. And the courts say, here there was a trade made. Why do you get the benefit of both of them? And what Utah was doing in the lawsuit is they were asking for the benefit of both. And there was a lingering legal question of, well, if Utah reneges on its contract to become a state, does that impact its grant of statehood? And would that now be unwound as part of this? And just from a legal precedent perspective, there was just far too much to bite off or chew in the lawsuit because of all the impacts it would have both to the statehood contract. There were other states that had similar contracts. It wasn't just Utah. And the federal government, it's pretty clear from the Constitution, the federal government can decide what the conditions are to become a state. It does give them that power. And so Utah said, okay, we'll give you this land forever. And so I look at it and say, necessary and proper clause and everything, I feel that the government acted within its power. Utah gave it, and Utah became a state, and it can't go and try and get the money back or, the benefit of the bargain back and then hold the car and the money. There was that. And so I think the Supreme Court just looked at it and said, this is silliness. We're not going to touch it.
Okay, so I'm trying to find it in the Constitution real quick. As you can see, I've got a worn out copy, but I don't have it memorized. I want to say in the Constitution, and this is something that some people that are for this type of measure has said that, and I couldn't find it real quickly when I was trying to fumble through the Constitution, that states come in on an equal footing. Each state comes in on an equal footing. And the counter to your thoughts is, it wasn't that way with Maryland. It wasn't that way with Kentucky. It wasn't that way with Tennessee, that 60% of the state was owned by the federal government. That is the kind of the counter.
Yeah, and I mean the counter to that is, well, the federal government could have just said your state is 30% of the size you propose. And so if that's the case, if that's the requirement, then Utah gets axed and it's 30% of its size, and the rest of the lands are just federal lands type thing. And so these are pieces where, you say, well, what's the solution? And to be clear, I don't believe the federal government should be controlling these lands from a moral perspective. Just to say, from a constitutional perspective, though, we signed a contract as a state. We let them have it. Many states did. And we're at this place now where we're asking the courts to undo over 100 years of what's been done. And I just say, yeah, the courts aren't going to touch it. Constitutionally, I don't think it's compelled because there's enough wiggle room in the Constitution to say, okay, well, then you're 30% your size. Is that what you want? And maybe that's what Utah wants. I don't know. I'm not sure what Utah wanted from this because they even took billboards out. They had this huge advertising budget of our taxpayer dollars that they did in cities or across the country saying, let Utah control Utah lands. And to me, it's some big political game they're playing that's bigger, on a bigger pay scale than I'm involved in. But the whole thing smelled fishy to me from the beginning.
Okay, so as much as from the general feeling of it, I agree with. When I saw that this campaign start up, I went, something's fishy going on here. Someone's trying to get some power out of this. I have my opinions of who that are, of who those individuals are. But I was like you, it smelled really fishy.
And again, from a legal perspective, it was never on good footing at all, in my opinion.
So the lawsuit was not on good footing.
Correct.
Okay, let's just say that the Derek Brown comes to you, now state AG, comes to you and says, Austen, this is what we want to do. We want to get Utah lands back. Do you think that there could have been a stronger lawsuit made? Do you think there's a stronger case to be made that it could be done? Or do you think this needs to be handled just by the federal legislature?
I'm a fan of, I think the state should go in and adversely possess some federal land. There's a very strong doctrine of adverse possession and of the common law saying that land has to be used productively or else you lose it. And I think Utah should just go adversely possess it and really write on that.
What does that mean?
That means they go and claim right to it and start using it and let the government essentially has to choose whether to kick them out or let them keep doing it. And there is, to be fair, there's a doctrine that says you can't adversely possess land owned by the government. But if it's a government versus government adverse possession, it's a fascinating case and one that I think would have way more sympathy from the Supreme Court. And this land's sitting there, so go put an oil well on it, and let Utah do its thing, and then let the government decide how they respond. And if they don't respond,
what about the state of Utah eminent domaining large portions of federal land? I'd love to see that done.
There's some fun things we could explore like that, but going to the Supreme Court and saying, look, we made a deal, we've got buyer's remorse, let us out of it type thing. Like, no, like be a little more creative about it and go about it differently, I would think, or suggest.
Well, there we go. We have another guest joining us. So Austen Hepworth. I'm going to bring on the great Joel Skausen real quickly for just a minute, and I will introduce him. But I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Joel Skausen may or may not be aware. I'm bringing you both, going to have you both on. Joel Skausen may not be aware of who Austen Hepworth is, but bottom line is I'm a big fan of both of you. Joel, Austen Hepworth ran for the Attorney General for the state of Utah.
Yes, I'm very well aware, and we're supportive of him.
Well, if you run again, Austen, you might have a supporter in Joel Skausen again. So, just Austen, I want to say thank you so much. You've been a great supporter of Talk with John. I've appreciated having you on over the years, and we look forward to having you back. And in fact, let's see what happens over the legislative session if we can get you back on.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure there'll be some things to talk about. So thanks, John.
All right. Thank you, my friend. God bless you. And we'll talk soon, Austen. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Joel, thank you for making time for me and time for our audience and joining us here on Talk with John. I really appreciate it.
Well, it was a tough go. I had double eye surgery today, so
Whoa!
I just barely made it home, and I can see well enough to see you, but I'm a little bit half blind still, and it'll clear up in the next few days. But I'll have to rely on my memory for what we talk about today.
So there's a part of me that's like, I'm really glad I didn't call you earlier today to say, hey, can you join? Can you join me? Because you might have said no. But let me put it this way: if there's a person that I'm going to go to remember things based off of their memory, it's going to be Joel Skausen. There's, I'm not concerned that you're not going to have a hard time remembering things, my friend. I really appreciate you being here. So to the audience, let's at the beginning of every hour, and when I bring on a new guest, I like to kind of re-intro the show. So let me do that with you on real quickly, Joel. And I'm also going to do, I'm going to tell the audience and introduce them to you. There are, as I'm reminded from time to time, usually on a monthly basis, there are new people that come and watch this and are coming to Main Street Media Utah all the time. We've got new viewers every single month. So I definitely want to do a quick introduction. But first, folks, this is Talk with John here on mainstreetmediautah.org. You can find more of our shows. We have a number of shows besides Talk with John, great shows with great people. And you can go and see the guests that they've had on, or you can go to that website, mainstreetmediautah.org, or you can go to our Twitter account and see the videos of the people that we've had on, as well as YouTube and Rumble. Those are some great resources to go to. Also, want to do just a quick talking. I want to do the top of the hour read that I do, a little bit about Talk with John, the Talk with John show. For me, this show, everything I do is from a mindset of liberty. And so I want to give out the show prayer and the show mantra again. As far as the show prayer, no need to bow your head, close your eyes. It's just the prayer in my heart. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra that I really try to accomplish is, where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. That's taken through places throughout Scripture, as well as Article 7, God of this land. The God of this world may be Satan, but the God of this land, the King of this land, the Lord of this land is Jesus Christ. And that was the founder's intent. So someone who has fought for liberty for years and years and years is Joel Skausen. And let me do a quick bio mention of his. Joel Skausen is a political scientist by training, specializing in the philosophy of law and constitutional theory, and is also a designer of high-security homes and residences and retreats. He has designed self-sufficient high-end security homes throughout North America and has consulted in Central America as well. Now, he has a number of books, Strategic Relocation. It's a North American guide to safe places. But he has also been in the political world for years. He has a great wealth of knowledge. Back from the 80s, he's been in the fight, whether fighting with or for or against the Republican Party. But since the 80s, he's been involved in this. And he also happens to be the nephew of Cleon Skausen. So, Joel Skausen, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. Let me comment on some of your introductory pieces. Yes, I was active in politics. In the Reagan administration, I got called back to Washington to chair the Conservative National Committee. We fought against Jimmy Carter for the giveaway of the Panama Canal, which looks like it may be coming back now, which is of great security concern to this nation. I'm also the editor. My primary occupation now is the editor and publisher of the World Affairs Brief. This is a weekly news analysis service from the perspective of what the deep state is doing underneath the table that you don't see in the mainstream news. So there is a unique point of view that I have. And I heartily endorse what you prayed about in terms of God being the Lord of this country. But I would add that he should be, but presently isn't, because the majority of people don't give a hoot about God and are not listening to the voice of conscience, where you hear the voice of the Lord individually as to your own weaknesses and warning you about things that you shouldn't do, whether it's eating junk food or being overweight or not exercising. You get warnings, you get promptings. And this nation is in chronic violation of the promptings of conscience. And that's why we're losing our liberty, frankly, is because now there's a minority of people, and I mean it's a minority. Only half of the people vote in this country. And of that half that vote, a third are Democrats, a third are independents, about 2/3 lean Republican, but only about a third are Republicans, and only about 25% of those are what we could call real conservative Republicans. The rest are mainstream, gut feeling conservatives, but don't know the arguments, et cetera. So we're in a precarious position, John. Now, we had an overwhelming vote, but we mustn't think for Trump, and it would have been even larger had not the Democrats done a great deal of false, hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens registered to vote, as well as computer fraud and other things that they normally do. But the Republican National Committee got smart this time, because Donald Trump required that they change leadership, and they hired 3,500 lawyers to staff every single counting location in the swing states. And they stopped them from stopping the count in the middle of the night, which they were planning on doing, so they could haul in truckloads of ballots. They stopped that. So those ballots didn't get counted, and that's why Trump won. So we mustn't think that the battle is won because of Trump here. Remember that Trump has never been a conservative before he came to Washington, friends with Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and others. But he has a good gut feeling about what it takes to make America great. The trouble is he doesn't know any of the arguments. And so when a man lives by briefings like Donald Trump does, in other words, he doesn't do any of his own homework. He doesn't watch the alternative news. He watches Fox News and lives by briefings. And so you get surrounded by mainstream people and even deep state people that are inserted into your campaign to spy on you, which has and is happening as we speak. Then it's very, very difficult to, co-opt the deep state. And you've got to know your history of conspiratorial thought and actions, both fact and theory, in order to tell who's deep state and who isn't deep state. And Donald Trump has never studied that. And so that's the reason why he was, talked into accepting Christopher Wray as replacement for James Comey, both deep state. Even his good choices for the Supreme Court turn out to be betraying him. Gorsuch has been a good choice, but Brett Kavanaugh was deep state. And the reason I know that is he was second in command to Ken Starr in the cover-up of the Vince Foster murder. The deep state murdered the attorney of the Clintons because he was going to spill the beans about the Clintons' finances. And then Amy Coney Barrett's been a mainstream person. Never voted against a big corporation, never ruled against the government. And sure enough, she's starting to turn on Donald Trump. So we're not out of the woods yet. Let's be very clear about that.
Yeah. Amy Coney Barrett was Brett Kavanaugh. I was concerned about Amy Coney Barrett. I was really concerned. I was much more concerned about her than Kavanaugh. Now, maybe that's my not understanding everything, and who knows. But the bottom line is there was a Hispanic lady from Florida that I think would have been a better choice. Her name goes out of the back of my mind. Here's another thing, audience, that I love about Joel Skausen. He's willing to call a spade, even to the host of a show. Notice he said, he mentioned overweight. Yeah, I got a gluttony problem. I admit it. Working on it. There is a few. They are working on it. There are a few less pounds than there were even at the end of last year. So
Good for
when we
you.
last met.
Good.
So
Good.
it is what it is.
Let me just be clarify. It isn't that being overweight is a gross sin, but it is a sin against conscience, because conscience is prompting you constantly to lose weight. And when you tell the Lord in your conscience to get lost, meaning I don't want to hear that, you're offending the Lord. And you don't know what you get blocked in terms of future warnings and future things. But believe me, as World War III approaches and all the crises that are going to come despite Donald Trump being president, you're going to need every single warning voice and prompting of conscience. And that means you've got to start to listen to the temporal warnings that you don't think are spiritual. You don't think they're from God, but they are. And you've got to remember that Satan also has access to your conscience. He's there to counter everything that God says. When he wants you to not buy that junk food, you have that voice, oh, it's okay this time. You can, straighten out next time. And, every little tiny rationalization, justification is that other voice. And it doesn't have to sound satanic. It doesn't have to sound dark or evil. In fact, most of the time, he's the one who gives you the comforting voice that, oh, you can be okay. You can relax. You don't have to work so hard. It's the Lord that's after you. It's the Lord that's after you. And we as a conservative people have to start to listen to the Lord in our minds in order to be able to get through these last days.
Well, this is something that I firmly believe. The more you listen to what he says, the more he gives you.
Yeah.
The less you listen to it, he's going to be like, I'm not even going to send him this message because I'm not, prophets only give out certain information, and then if the people continue to reject him, they shut their mouths because they understand, well, this will damn you if I keep on saying it.
Actually, the Lord is one who shuts their mouths, and he says, no, they're not listening. Don't bother. Go seek out the true sheep. And that's one of the ways to avoid discouragement in our movement is stop trying to spend so much time convincing people who don't sense that anything's wrong. Work on the people who sense that something's wrong in the world. They're the people who are at least starting to open their minds to the fact that there's a deep state going on and there's conspiracy going on.
Well, I don't know if you saw an email that I sent you, but there are a number of topics that I want to touch on. So I'm going to read.
I haven't seen it yet, so go ahead and go through those.
So let me read the topics, and then let's just hit them however you want to. But as always, you are the guest, and you are the knowledgeable guest. Whatever Joel Skausen wants to cover, if there's something that I haven't mentioned that you want to cover, let's make sure we cover it. And I love you talking about the voice of conscience. To me, that's. Is there anything more important than listening to the voice of conscience?
That's real religion. We all differ in terms of our level of Christianity, et cetera. And there are even good Muslims that are subscribers to my World Affairs Brief. But one thing they all have in common, if you're sincere, you listen to the voice of conscience. And it comes to everybody until you start to say, I don't want to hear it. But that's real religion. We can differ over a lot of little nuances and things, but the bottom line where God is going to judge us on how we respond to his voice. And you can claim to be born again, but if you're not submissive to his voice, if you don't love his voice, then you're not born again, no matter what kind of one-time experience you may have had.
Amen. Okay, and please forgive me having a little bit of a chuckle, but there's a lot of truth. I mean, wow, there's tons of truth to that, people. And one of the reasons why I chuckle is because I'm guilty for not listening to all of the statements. I think I'm better than I used to be. I take that back. I know I'm better than I used to be, but I have a lot of room for improvement. And,
a lot of conservatives are what we call selective listeners to conscience. So are successful businessmen. They're selectively listening to every bit of financial advice they can get. They listen to nervous feelings about the stock market crashing. But when it comes to losing weight or eating right or not watching pornography, they throw that away. They say, no, I'm free to do what I want to do. Yeah, you are free to do what you want to do, but you're not free to evade the consequences. And so that's why I say we must not be selective listeners. We have to, if you really are if you really love truth And this is something I've always recognized ever since I was a teenager, is that people that come to truth, even in one area, whether it's natural health, whether it's conservative thought, whether it's true religion or other things, the Lord starts to broaden that. Good Christians start to learn about conservative politics. Conservative politics start to learn about natural health. And you see, it's one thing leads to another. And if you have blinders on and you say, no, I just want to stay in this track and I don't want to listen to anything else, then you're going to get cut off, because the Lord is interested in broadening us to all truth. And I'm sorry to go off on this tangent, but it's very, very important to us. This is why we're failing as a conservative movement to save our children. You know, you send them to public schools and you wonder why they all turn out to be liberals. Even if you Mormons send them to BYU, they turn out to be liberals, because the campus is full of credentialed professors, and credentials means left, liberal, or Marxist. You can't get credentials in the social sciences without being on the left.
Preach. I mean, really, I listening to the voice of conscience. I love the way you put it. There's other ways to put that statement, but you putting it, that statement, it's a thing that everybody can get. And listening, and the, I think you said this, but I want to re-hit it. The more you listen to the voice of conscience, the more areas that can come to. And so I'm going to say, which way are you heading, folks? Are you trying to listen more, or are you trying to listen to less? And that matters.
Yeah.
All right. So here are the topics that I want to cover. How much is Trump being fought with his agenda by the left? What is, and maybe a subsection of this, what Biden is doing? What is Biden doing on his way out as far as pardons and other things that they're trying to put, landmines they're trying to put in? And let me clarify that a little bit more. Biden's not doing anything.
Yeah, right.
Other than every once in a while he's a mouthpiece for something. But Biden's not doing a single thing. LA County fire, was it manufactured, or at the least, what about the mitigation of fires? Was that manufactured? Terror attacks in New Orleans and Las Vegas. What subject do you want to cover first?
Let's talk about the first two topics are the most important. That is the battle against Trump. And one of the nuances here that I want to cover first of all is that there's a certain percentage.
Actually, you started to go down this path. Can I hit Trump real quickly? The Trump point. This is something that Joel says, and I want to hit this real quickly. And this is something that a number of other people have said. Just because, don't go to sleep. Last time we went to sleep when Trump got in, oh, great, everything's taken care of. Hey, when you get the man in office, we need to vocalize what we think he's doing wrong and what he's doing right. And we need to reach out to our state representatives, and we need to be vocal. Sorry, I'll be quiet.
No, that's a very, very good point, and one that I want to emphasize as well, because you see, Trump was going to name Mike Pompeo again to major positions, and it was only his grassroots supporters that, no, you can't do that. This guy's deep state. It shows that Trump still doesn't know who's deep state. You know, you have people come to Mar-a-Lago and palaver with Trump, and they flatter him. And when you flatter Trump, he's on your side. He just loves to be flattered. He loves loyalty above anything, and that's a problem, because loyalty is not more important than truth. And so he tends to reject people, who criticize him, but he shouldn't. A true lover, a leader who loves truth will relish criticism as long as it's honest and he feels it's true. But as I covered in last week's World Affairs Brief, one of his former national security advisors says, I've heard through the grapevine that about 50% of the National Security Council is planning on staying on, that Trump's going to let him stay on, and that's a mistake. In the fresh faces, you've got to make sure that they have the expertise that you want. Yes, it's important to be loyal, but it's also important to really have the expertise so they can't be criticized, by the establishment. But Biden is really loading the bases against Trump. And some of this Trump can overturn, but some of those the courts will uphold, and the courts are going to turn out to be the big nemesis of Donald Trump during his administration. Everything from immigration policy changes to other things that the judges are going to overturn him. So Biden has legalized the status of over 600,000 illegals that came in. He suddenly said, you're under a guaranteed new program where you have legal status. And that's like a pardon. Now, I think it can be overturned, but that will have to go through the courts as well. Of course, he's loaded the courts with over 400 left liberal judges that will affect Donald Trump. And there are thousands in the country. And Donald Trump, he loaded the courts with about 300, some mainstream conservative or mainstream judges. Now, there's a difference. See, the Biden judges are all hardcore left. Nobody who's a true constitutionalist even gets put up for judgeship.
When would you say the last judge was even put up for nomination, say on the Supreme Court or something along those lines, that was a true constitutionalist?
Judge Bork, Robert Bork,
who
during the Reagan administration.
And let's see, how long was he on the Supreme Court?
Well, he was never on the Supreme. He was rejected by the Senate. Resoundingly rejected because he was a staunch constitutionalist. Now, Neil Gorsuch is probably the best justice in the past 30 years to go on the court, and he's shown his mettle, that he's done a lot of good judgment. Brett Kavanaugh has been a terrible disappointment. You know, he does rule with the conservative majority until he gets that phone call in the night, because he's deep state, because Judge Roberts is deep state. You know, the word on the street is he's got some gay stuff in his closet, and typical gays marry, so they've got the cover of a traditional marriage like Barack Obama, but they're gay, and but they've got dirt on Judge Robert, and they've got dirt on Brett Kavanaugh because he was part of the cover-up of the Vince Foster murder, a second in command, in fact. So those are the two that turn the tide and vote against the conservative majority whenever there's a crucial issue, and that will continue. And now Amy Coney Roberts is joining that group as well. So there's really three of them that are turncoats. So it's not a 6-3 conservative majority. It's really, it's 3-6 in terms of the crucial issues. But what I was going to say is that many heads of corporate America are dumping DEI and DEI staffs, whether it's Walmart, whether it's Target hasn't yet, but Walmart and Costco has, and other things, that used to be right in line with the DEI agenda, are dumping it. And then you have Mark Zuckerberg not only stopping fact checking, but coming out and admitting directly. Now, I think Zuckerberg's an opportunist. This guy has never shown any principles. All right. I think.
I agree. But why do you say that?
I think because he met Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And so this solidifies that relationship so that he can have insider access to Donald Trump to influence him on certain things. I don't think for a minute this guy is a converted, true believer in anti-censorship, et cetera. But he came out and even said, it was the Biden administration put heavy pressure on us to censor. This was censorship. It went too far. I mean, he went beyond just saying, we're stopping fact checking, which you may or may not trust, to actually come out and condemn fact checking and say it's all left bias and we were wrong, et cetera. He went way far into the conservative camp, and he's no conservative. He's no conservative. So you got to watch out for those turncoats that suddenly are too good to be true. I mean, it's like, J.D. Vance is vice president. I mean, this guy's got an establishment background from the beginning of law school to his relationship, with Silicon Valley billionaires, et cetera. Who in law school has the time to write a novel? Now, you think about that. Anybody who's been to law school and you're studying day and night, you don't have time to write a novel. That was ghost written for him. And then they make a Hollywood movie out of it and give it an Academy Award. All right, that's a setup. That's a setup to make a phony conservative into, and he's very articulate. This guy's good. He's much better than Donald Trump at arguing these points. But I still don't trust him. I think that if he ever became president, and they're not through trying to kill Donald Trump, they could still assassinate him. They tried twice and missed, but they won't miss if they do a third time. I really am worried if J.D. Vance becomes the president. Now, Biden, of course, has done many other things. Now, one of the things I might say that Biden has done to disarm the conservatives, he backed down on 7 of their super left interpretations of Title IX and other bureaucratic things, and backed down, even though just as the courts overruled them and said, you can't redefine sex in Title IX to include transgenders. But they backed down on that a few days before. Maybe it was to avoid the embarrassment of having it being overturned by the courts. I don't trust these people. As you say, Biden doesn't decide anything. These are all decided by deep state, which runs in total the Biden administration. But you've got some pretty good people that Donald has chosen, but they're loyal. That's about all you can say. None of them know the history of the deep state. Tulsi Gabbard used to be a Democrat. She's turned over to be a Republican and fairly consistent since she's become a Republican. But, she doesn't know the history of the deep state. And as DNI, Director of National Intelligence, you've got to be able to filter. That's the filter of what gets to Donald Trump. And if you don't understand the phony war on terror, you don't understand that the deep state did 9/11, loaded the buildings with explosives, hired the terrorists, switched out the airplanes, or 2 of the airplanes with drones from the West Coast, things like that. You're going to get, as they blow up the war on terror again in Syria, like they're doing right now, claiming that HST, the al-Jawani, the leader of the people who took over Syria, is a good guy. He's ISIS. And who's ISIS? Well, the deep state created ISIS, just like they created Al-Qaeda.
Okay, I want to go to, I want to come back to 2 things. So I want to, as you're mentioning these people that are coming on with Donald Trump, one of the people I want you to talk about is Elon Musk. I'm curious your thoughts on who Elon Musk really is, but I want to go back real quickly to Facebook. Here's one of the biggest reasons why I think Mark Zuckerberg is just about, hey, I know which way the wind is blowing and I'm better at it than anybody, but actually I'm a true liberal at heart. In 2020, how many millions of dollars did he give in funding or non-actual funding, but how much did Facebook put towards promoting Biden over Trump? I want to say it was hundreds of millions dollars worth of.
Well, most of that money actually went to Democratic NGOs that were registering voters and working on the Democratic side. So he was a full Democrat during all those elections in terms of, to the tune of millions of dollars. Now he's given $1 million to the Trump inauguration, but that's just a little tantalizing gift, to Donald Trump to woo Donald Trump over. As I say, right. I don't trust Zuckerberg at all.
Yes, I completely agree. So
now let's talk about Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk is a very, very smart guy. All right. Yeah, Elon Musk is smart. Now, he has a very checkered background, everything from transhumanism to married to a semi-witch, other type of person. He's got he doesn't have any spiritual past at all. This is another person who, with a lot of money, I have to say, he's not just talking the talk. He's actually doing a lot in Europe. For example, he has literally caused havoc over there just by endorsing the AFD party, which is the right-wing, pro-constitution, anti-vaccine freedom party of Germany, and has brought it into a major and they are condemning Elon Musk, for as long as the day is long, because he is interfering with their election. Well, he's influencing. Now, that isn't the same as interfering. But, if Elon Musk was just playing a game, I personally think that Elon Musk is a chameleon. He can go where the wind blows. But I think he likes being on the conservative side now. I really do. Because first of all, it has a lot to do with making money to be in with the Trump administration, to getting those particular contracts. But I sense the Elon Musk likes the change. Now remember, he's a person who came from a no principle background. And suddenly he's had the taste of what the conservative movement does in fighting against censorship. And he loves fighting against the EU. He loves fighting against Goliath. He's got this David versus Goliath mentality, whether it's in SpaceX or Starlink or other things. He's fought censorship here and there. So although I don't trust him as I would trust a principled person who has been principled all his life, my gut feeling is he likes being a conservative. I think he's going to be fairly good at it, frankly.
Okay. All right, Joel. Here is where I'm going. Here's a question that's percolating in the back of my mind. You mentioned this. He married a witch. I mean, a Wiccan. I want to say she was an actual declared witch. So he was willing to do that. I also go, if there's anyone that I would say that's in the running for possibly being the Antichrist, I can't think of a better figure than Elon Musk. And
I would have to disagree there.
Okay, good.
Whether or not the Antichrist is a single person or an organization, we know that the globalist deep state agenda is Antichrist, and it's very deeply involved in Pope Francis. The current Pope is a globalist and very much anti, conservative Christianity that many of its followers follow. But I'm not sure it's a single person. But as I say, I'm pretty good at reading people and reading the Spirit of the Lord witness to me. And I know real evil. I mean, one day I met in Washington Strobe Talbot, who was on Henry Kissinger's team. And I tell you, he walked into the room. It was just like feeling your hair on the back of your neck. It was like the devil incarnate had walked in the room. I know what real evil feels like. And he was a real, true, satanic individual. Same thing with Henry Kissinger. Zbigniew Brzezinski had that same feeling. Sandy Berger has that. Mike Pompeo smiles and has this goofy, youthful thing. But so he doesn't give you that evil. These are people who aren't necessarily innately evil, but have become evil through environmental and inducements of the deep state. And there's a difference. I don't get that feeling from Elon Musk of innate evil. That's just my gut feeling.
I feel much better now, Joel. I feel much better because I always go to what the counter of people could be. One other thing that I will throw in Elon's favor is so if there's one thing that we can take down, if we can take down sex trafficking and pedophilia that the deep state is in, that the powers that be, the conspiratorialists, those that really run the world, even, you could say above presidents and so forth, along the lines of King Charles and those type of groups.
And all those.
Right. I mean, they use, are you willing to commit pedophilia and worse? Elon Musk is talking about the rape games and helping bring those things to light. You typically don't do that if you are part of the deep state, if you're part of the powers that be. So I really wanted I was like, I've got to ask Joel about Elon Musk. So I'm glad to hear what you have to say.
I'm not giving a blanket endorsement. I'm just saying I don't get the feeling he's got innately evil. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So who are a couple of the other people that you want to talk about as far as on Trump's that are being part of Trump's team? And who are the ones we need to watch out? Other good ones and ones that we need. Peter.
The first part, the most important thing is that the National Security Advisor in this case is not going to be Trump's handler. Handlers are always the NSA head or the vice president. That's the anomaly during George W. Bush's administration. Dick Cheney was his handler as vice president. And he expanded the staff of the vice presidency upward around 600 people because he had his hands in every agency of government. He was running the government, including 9/11 when it happened. It was Dick Cheney now there's a person who's truly evil. All right. There's a person who's truly evil. And Liz Cheney, his daughter, is just about as evil as could be as well. Nancy Pelosi, those are evil people. I mean, these are just really the scum of the earth. They've made themselves wealthy through insider dealing and trading, Hillary Clinton, etc. But as I say, there's the hypocrisy of King Charles, for example, is to pretend to be a benevolent king and then to be involved in so much deep evil globalist stuff as he has been and promoted those things like the Rothschilds and others. But remember that even though the deep state is, and I want to emphasize this to your listeners, it is not the holdover bureaucracy of Democrats and others that thwart Trump in office. That's not the deep state. The deep state are the enforcement arm, the secret teams of hitmen and hit squads who assassinate presidents, who assassinate or hire stooges to assassinate Trump. That's the real deep state, and they are the enforcement arm of the larger globalist conspiracy. It's the globalist conspiracy that has been running this nation since the turn of the last century, when they got Wilson into power, when they gave us World War I, they got us into World War II, they brought the communists to power by funding the Bolshevik Revolution. They brought Mao Zedong to power by cutting off aid to Chiang Kai-shek. They brought Castro to power. They brought the Sandinistas.
It started in 1913. It started in 1913 with the Federal Reserve and the income tax,
which was signed by Wilson. And they had to get Wilson in, and he was a globalist puppet. He regretted what he did. When he left office, he finally said, there is a secret organization so evil, so dark that no one dare speak about it above a whisper. So he knew what he had got into, but he couldn't say it. He feared for his life. But they had dirt on him. He had an affair with a secretary. There was president of Princeton University in New Jersey, and continued that on. So it mattered in those days if you had an affair. It doesn't matter anymore with the public, but it did in those days. That's how they kept him under control. But you see, this has been going on for years. They've allowed China to steal technology. It was Henry Kissinger that gave World Trade Center or organization status brought him into the UN, gave him a seat on the Security Council with veto power.
Speaking of China, he's speaking of China, folks.
What did I say? Yeah, it was China. Yeah, Henry Kissinger gave it away at the Paris peace talks, and Vietnam. China had nothing to do with Vietnam except be the major sponsor of the Vietnamese. And when you're going to have a peace treaty where North Vietnam comes to the peace table ready to capitulate because of the bombing in Hanoi was pulverizing the city, what do? You tell the North Vietnamese, just give us 3 years before you take back the South. And it was about 3 years to the month before they did. And then to reward China with a seat on the UN, with a Security Council, and to take it away from Taiwan. That's Henry Kissinger, a real evil globalist. But the deep state is the enforcement arm within, and it's broad now. It's within Germany, France, Italy. All of the Western countries have their own version of the deep state, and the U.S. runs it through the NSA, the spy agencies, the satellite spying, including Japan and Australia are part of the Five Eyes, and New Zealand.
New Zealand, really?
Yeah.
Is that? I didn't realize New Zealand was a power player in that.
They're not, but they share the intelligence with them, and that's why they control New Zealand.
Okay, so I want to go down this rabbit hole. There's who's on top? Britain?
We don't know who's
Israel?
on top. We'll never know who's on top. But it doesn't make any difference. We know who the public players are: the George Soros, the Klaus Schwabs, the Henry Kissingers, the big name. You can see who the major globalist promoters are. The Pope Francis is a former Marxist Jesuit from Argentina. And either he's playing up to the globalist as a communist, or he's been bought out. You look at Tony Blair, was a socialist and a Marxist, and they brought him in to become prime minister. And I think he became a globalist puppet during that period. I don't know whether he's playing one side or the other. Look at Barack Obama, a communist organizer in Chicago. They don't make communist organizers a U.S. senator or a president. But if you sell them out, if you sell out to the globalists, then they make you wealthy. That's why he's worth over $20 million today. He has that huge property in Hawaii and Chicago and Martha's Vineyards, etc. They don't do that for communists. They use communists. They fund them. George Soros funds BLM and Antifa, and they waste that money on lavish living like all communist cadres do. But they don't make them president unless they sell out. Look at Angela Merkel, former communist from East Germany. Look at Olaf Scholz, the current chancellor of Germany, former communist. Former, we say. We don't know. Are they still in line with Putin, or have they really been bought out by the globalists? It's a real interesting. It's very, very complex, these conspiracy facts and theories.
Okay, kind of going down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. What are your thoughts on the LA fires? Because man, so they're bringing in the Olympics. They want to do 15-minute cities. They want to reimagine and redo. I wish I had Gavin Newsom's statement that he gave, talking about, I'm not going to let anybody come in and control who's taking over and buying the land. I'm going to make sure that that is taken care of. And I'm like, I bet you're going to make sure that it's taken care of, and your buddies are going to benefit. So, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the LA fire? Because
well, you know,
it's shut up on that.
Like the drone situation is very complex, mixed with UFOs and U.S. and military things and Chinese. You know, it's a mix of things. I'm not one that has bought the fact that all of these wildfires have. I don't buy directed energy weapons starting them in the first place. All right, I don't buy that. Those things are controlled. They're still experimental. We do have some. They're tightly controlled. You would have to suborn some pretty smart military people. And the deep state doesn't control the technical people in the military. They can control the higher ups, the generals and the admirals, you see, of the Space Force, and who gets promoted, et cetera, because you've got to, go to Georgetown, or the National War College, and listen to Georgetown globalist professors orient to you, and you don't get to be a general admiral until you buy into the globalist agenda. I can buy that conspiracy, but to get the technicians involved with lasers and other things to go and shoot those lasers or command the satellites to shoot them, that requires you've got to really coerce these people into lifetime silence, like they do to the people who work on Area 51. 30,000 plus to 40,000 people each day get out there to Area 51, and not one of them has ever leaked because they have threatened with death, and their families and their children and their grandchildren with death if they tell. But they don't like to do that, and it's fairly justifiable to the people who work out there. Yeah, we're in a top secret facility. We have to do the thing. But, to tell those people now to go out and kill civilians and to burn 50,000 homes and things, that weighs on good people's conscience. And Area 51 people don't have to feel bad about what they're doing out there, okay? Because most of it's okay. Most of it's, top secret work. There is some alien spacecraft working and trying to recreate things, which I don't think they're able to do, because this Earth is locked into its Newtonian physics by the decree of God, who has this as a testing planet. We're not going to get anti-gravity, in my opinion, and we can't do right-angle turns at Mach 25. You just can't do that with the law of inertia. So there is arson, though. That is
so I wanted to hit. So there's arson. There's leaving the power lines on.
That's right.
In California recently, you'll see those trees, tons of trees with power lines running through them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Now, let's talk about the trees burning. Remember that when high wind fires, the fire stays fairly low to the ground. And so you can spare the canopy of many trees. It happened in Maui. It happened in Santa Rosa, and Sonoma, and Napa. It's happened in the Paradise Fire, and it's happened in this version of the Paradise, which is different than Butte County Paradise Fire. It's the largest fire so far until this one. Butte County burned 82 structures. Most of those homes, right, 82. And that was caused by a power line. They knew it happened. The power line was down and arcing against the metal tower. And they had they were trying to, shut down the power, and they didn't get it in time, and it started the Paradise Fire. But there was a Paradise Fire in Butte County again in 2022. That was 2018 when the big fire happened. In 2021, they arrested an arsonist. And I have the name of him, but it's interesting. When you go to any of the county records, you can't find any prosecution of this arsonist.
Really?
There's no record of his prosecution. He was arrested. They had all the indictment and everything, but you even ask ChatGPT, who is the best, much better than Google search at scouring the internet for information. And yeah, they'll talk about that he was arrested, he was indicted because they knew that he had started the fires, and yet you can't find where he went to prison. You can't find the court case. So that's very suspicious about arson. Now, in the LA County ones, there have been two people. One guy running around, a Latino, didn't speak English, running around with a propane container with a torch on it. And there were several people saw him and said, "What are you doing with that?" And they're chasing him around. Finally, they tackle him in the ground, take away his torch, etc. But anybody's doing out in the public with a torch, doesn't look good. It would be very hard to prosecute. It'd be easy to him say, "I was taking it from this place to A to B," but it is very suspicious. Now, the other guy that had a propane canister with one of those brush burning torches that was tackled by the woman in the Kenneth fire, I think it was. Yeah, he's being prosecuted. So there is arson going on, but I've seen the satellite video of the 3 fires that start simultaneously. And I just don't think that's arson because there's no reason to do it simultaneously. It'd be very difficult to coordinate to do it. And for what purpose? Why do you need to start it simultaneously? What difference does it make if one is 5 minutes later than the other, or even 1 or 2 people run and start one at a different? It's more likely that this was a huge gust of wind that blew down 3 sections of power line at the same time, because a 100-mile-an-hour gust of wind would do that. Now, PG&E is absolutely responsible for not shutting down the power in time to these things. Now, a lot of people online have said, well, they wanted to preserve their income because that's baloney. They paid out a $3 billion fine last time there was a major fire for failing to shut down the power. There's no amount of income for leaving the power on a day or so early that's going to compensate for a $3 billion fine that you're going to pay. And I even saw pictures from an airliner of the fire burning, and all around the fire are lights blazing, meaning the fire hasn't even been shut down. I mean, that's just unconscionable. And then looting has been a major problem, and that's a harbinger of what's going to happen when the lights go out, and you have all of these gangs, you have all of these minorities, you have all of these illegal aliens cooped up in refugee camps, and they're going to be let loose, and they're going to go pillaging for what it's worth. So this is not, I think this is going to be probably the most costly fire ever in California history. And of course, you've got the problem of the reservoir running dry. For a year, the main reservoir that fed into the Palisades fire hydrant system was up for repairs. The lady who's in charge of this system in LA County makes $750,000 a year.
Boy, I'd like to make that.
$750,000. It's double the salary of the former one. I mean, this Marxist mayor of LA, and she's an outright livid Marxist, part of the Vincent Amos brigade that goes to Cuba every 6 months, etc. And then she's picked a lesbian for the head of the fire department, who's utterly incompetent, who got fired because she blew the whistle on the mayor for cutting funding of $17 million. And that wouldn't have made much of a difference. What would have made a difference is to have those reservoirs full so that you can fight the fire and to shut down the power. I mean, I think that most of these fires were caused by power lines breaking in the high winds, and there's no excuse for letting any of that power go on. And if the power's off, then you can spot very easily when those fires are starting at night and get on them right away, and you can prosecute and capture arsonists. They're very obvious if they happen at night. But I don't buy the directed energy weapons. This 1 or 2 videos that show a laser beam coming down, that's photoshopped, because first of all, there's no fire starting once the laser beam hits. It's the same thing with the UFO scare in New Jersey. You saw various UFOs or laser or drones shoot a laser beam on the Earth, but no damage reports. Now, either that means it was photoshopped, or what's the purpose of shooting a laser at the ground if you're not going to damage something? You see what I mean?
Right.
And one of the things that I've noted in my work on UFOs, which really do exist, I mean, UFOs exist, but I still don't see hardly anything ever about damage, about interference in the Earth. And I don't believe that, theologically, that we're alone in the universe. I think it's a free market universe. You know, entities, intelligent entities, are capable of creating bodies and intelligent beings that look different than ours. But because God controls this earth as a testing point with an atonement and all of that type of thing, he allows them to visit, but they're not allowed to touch. They're not allowed to interfere. So I'm very skeptical of Greer's medical doctor who claims he's the biggest UFO all about illegal or about aliens interacting with human beings and having extraterrestrial technology that the U.S. government, he claimed. But he's never, despite all of his claims, including recently about 51 whistleblowers, he's going to come public, they never show up. He never comes up with any substance. After all these years of claiming these things, where's the evidence, Dr. Greer? That's what I said.
Okay, so sometime I want to talk to you, and maybe in one of these next upcoming times coming on, I'd love to talk to you about what you think is happening with UFOs. Now, another thing for the audience, aren't you a former F-4 Phantom pilot?
That's right. During the Vietnam era, I
And
flew.
weren't you a carrier pilot as well?
Right. Yeah, we're all carrier trained, and I did carrier calls and things on the USS Midway.
So the bottom line is, folks, you have to be a very skilled pilot, one, to be an F-4 Phantom pilot, two, to be on an aircraft carrier. There are plenty of people that are pilots, but they are not aircraft carrier qualified, and not so that is a very high level of skill and understanding of aircraft. And so, Joel, I definitely want to get your thoughts. Probably, maybe even next time, talk about UFOs, where you think what they are, where you think they're coming from.
Well, I won't claim to have a lot of answers because, frankly, I think a lot of it's unknowable. I mean, since you can't.
And that I accept that. I accept that. You know, so
I do have some ideas that we can discuss.
Okay. All right. So we're just about out of time. We've got about 5 minutes left. We've covered a lot of ground. There was, in fact, we've covered all of the three main subjects that I wanted to talk about. Is there anything that you're going, John? I think this is one of the most important things that we on this show have not discussed, or that is not being talked about in the community, the conservative community, that you want to bring up here in the next few minutes. And we can go a little after 6 o'clock if you'd like, but to honor you, we can close right at pretty close to 6. But
yeah, I have an hour deadline where I can't do much more than that. But you know, because of this eye surgery, I've been behind the 8 ball in terms of preparing for this next week's World Affairs Brief. But I think the most important thing that's missing in the conservative movement is a real solid understanding of conspiracy theory and fact. This is important because that's what distinguishes those that are capable of helping Donald Trump and those that are not. Remember, Donald Trump got excoriated by the mainstream media for inviting on his aircraft, the Trump campaign aircraft, Laura Loomer. And her only claim to fame in conspiracy is believing that 9/11 was an inside job, which it was. It was a deep state operation from the beginning, but she doesn't know anywhere near the information that I know about 9/11. All right. You see, that's the problem. A lot of people have tried to get me to be able to brief Donald Trump. I mean, if I could spend 2 hours with him and orient about the history of the deep state and show him how, you know, the deep state operates and all of the various deep state operations, including 9/11 and And as a result of the COVID-19 conspiracy and things, it could turn Donald Trump around if he had the courage to admit that he was wrong about the vaccine and Operation Warp Speed, which so far he's never had the courage to do. At best, he's been able to say, I won't mandate anything in the future. But, if the media ever got wind that a conspiracy expert like Joel Skausen was meeting with Donald Trump, all hell would break loose. They would crucify Trump. I mean, think what they did for Laura Loomer, who doesn't know anything hardly about it, other than that it was making the claim it was an insider job. But you see, the reason the mainstream media is so concerned about conspiracy facts and theories, and the reason we still deal in theory, is that most of the conspiracy facts are still hidden under the guise of national security. And we're never going to know all the details about 9/11 or the
Kennedy assassination,
because they're not going to release the files, or the Martin Luther King files. Why do they keep those locked up past the 50 years?
Gee, I wonder why.
It's because, 8 of the 13 file cabinets are filled with pornography of this FBI surveillance of his trysts with prostitutes almost every night, including at his Nobel Prize ceremony. And the other 3, and I got this straight from Patrick Gray, who was deputy FBI director after Hoover died, who told me, I can't tell you what's in it specifically, but 8 of those file cabinets are filled with the pornographic videos and, well, not videos, but films they've got and tape recordings of his trysts. And then the other 3 are his relationship with communists. And here's a man that we're supposed to celebrate as a national holiday, a communist fellow traveler and the biggest immoral religious hypocrite that has ever walked the earth. Nobody's greater than Martin Luther King, and a plagiarist as well in terms of his doctoral dissertation. But anyway, that's what I'm saying is that conservatives, especially younger conservatives, are all about Donald Trump, and they don't understand you've got to know the basic facts about how the world works and how conspiracy works in every time period of life. And if you don't know the history of conspiracy, you don't know the history. And it's carefully expunged from our universities and even books. It's out there, though. I mean, there's a lot of books out there, and I've gathered them all. And in fact, at worldaffairsbrief.com or joelskausen.com under videos, I've got my 8 or 10-point series with Lost Arts Radio on the history of the deep state, which you can listen to for free. So that's what I want to leave people with, is that don't put all your eggs on Donald Trump. He's got good intentions. He doesn't have the skills to drain the deep swamp. It's not going to be drained. In fact, I think they're going to stymie him with the courts on almost everything. So this is a frustrating battle. Remember when Ronald Reagan got elected, funding dried up for conservative movements because we won. When Trump got elected the first time, funding dried up for conservative organizations. And now the same thing's going to happen because people think that we win. Now, you have to be careful about who you contribute to in conservative organizations, because a lot of them spend most of that money in the salaries of their own staff and to promote what they're doing and a little bit of public things, but they eat up 90% of the money. That's one of the reasons why I left Washington, was I couldn't very well in good conscience keep promoting these organizational save the world, save the canal, and other, because 90% of the money that we were collecting was going for administrative purposes.
Wow.
Now, people have to live. I understand that, but we ought to be much better about doing things, especially now that we've got social media where you can do things for a much cheaper price than direct mail.
Well, Joel, let's do this. Please tell people how they can go and get the World Affairs Brief. Folks, I pay for the World Affairs Brief. At one point, I thought it was that valuable that I went out and I get my own World Affairs Brief. I get it every week on Fridays, and I get the MP3s, which Andrew, your son, who does the
audio recording.
He also does the preparedness tip, which is the last section of the World Affairs Brief.
Yeah, that recording is very popular. A lot of people don't have time to read the 16-page brief each week, and so they just sit down when they're driving or commuting and put it on MP3 on their iPhone and put it into their car speakers and listen to it. Well, the World Affairs Brief is only $48 a year. That's about $1 a week. And I know people are used to getting things free from the internet, but it takes me a lot of time and work to bring my unique perspective to people, which you get nowhere else. No other conservative, whether it's Epic Times or Breitbart News or any of those other good sites, will talk about conspiracy. So you get it from me, about $1 a week at worldaffairsbrief.com. The way to subscribe, there's a big red subscribe button, but I recommend first you go to the left-hand side and click on Request a Sample. And in that sample, it tells you all the options, whether it's subscribed by the month or the year, or every 2 years, by check or PayPal, or multiple ways to pay for it that are easy. But anyway, I'd appreciate your support.
It's well worth it, folks. It'll be some of the very best money you will spend. I guarantee it. Joel, thank you so much for joining us again. The second Tuesday of every month. I'm grateful to have you joining me. Thank you so much for being on today, and we'll see you in February.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
All right. Thank you. All right, folks, this has been Talk with John. Once again, we want to say thank you to Joel Skausen, fantastic guest, and Austen Hepworth. Thank you so much to both of them for joining us here today on Talk with John on Main Street Media Utah. You can go and, once again, go to mainstreetmediautah.org. You can also go to our YouTube, X, and Rumble channels. God bless. See you next week. We should have David Pine. Take care.